Welcome back to another episode of the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. And if you are listening and watching on YouTube, then welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited today because we are going to be looking at, I don't know if you pronounce it Summarize, but basically if you're not looking at the screen like in YouTube and you're listening to the podcast instead, it is a program called Summarize, but they've added an A in there. So like Summer, A-I-Z-E. So yeah. So Summarize. I don't know how you meant to pronounce it, but I have been testing out this AI tool for, I don't know, weeks and weeks and weeks now. I've put so many of my podcast episodes through this software. I think it's so fantastic. And I want to start off by saying I'm not an affiliate of Summarize, how you pronounce it. If anyone knows if it's Summarize or Summarize, please do let me know. But I'm not an affiliate. I just wanted to be able to share it with everybody. So first of all, it is at summarize.com. And what it promises to do is to 10x your podcast and video content in 10 minutes. And I have to say, I have not been disappointed by this tech at all. What's really cool about it is to get started, you can start for free. It gives you 60 minutes worth of upload for free, which is quite generous, I think. I mean, it depends on how long your podcast episodes are. For the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting, because the episodes are only ever 10, 15 minutes, for me, that's great because I can get at least 4 or 5 episodes in that free 60 minutes. But if your episodes normally run at about 60 minutes, you can still get 1 episode done for free. AI has really exploded in the last few months. We've got ChatGPT, which I'm actually going to be a bit controversial. ChatGPT is not my favorite AI tool out there. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that ChatGPT has definitely got its merits. It's a hugely, insanely powerful piece of equipment. I don't want to go into the pros and cons of AI and things like ChatGPT because we could be here all day talking about that. And that's not what I want to talk about for this episode. But what I don't like about ChatGPT is that I just feel it's got to the point where it's almost been overused. And I just feel like there's a lot of people who, I don't kind of quote unquote, don't use it properly. I don't know. I was at LinkedIn recently, and I just get a bit fed up of seeing the amount of posts that you can tell are obviously just copied and pasted from ChatGPT. And there's no personality to them. There's no injection of how the person would speak. It's just kind of, it is what it is. And it's not my favorite thing. I mean, ChatGPT is fantastic. As I said, it's got its pros, it's got its cons, but I also personally, and I know there's going to be a lot of you that disagree, but personally, I don't think it's the best tool out there for different things that you could create, particularly when it comes to podcasting. So like I said, I have been trying out Summarize. We're just going to call it Summarize for the purpose of this. But I have been trialing out Summarize for the last good few weeks, as I said, at this stage, probably easily 5-6 weeks. And I have just found it an absolute game changer when it comes to getting content for my podcast. I upload my file, and you can upload MP3, WAV, M4A, MP4s, movies, or M4Vs, or whatever. You can also use YouTube videos or YouTube links, and then it just does the work for you to go make a cup of tea and come back to it later. From a pricing point of view, you can either subscribe to it or you can pay as you go. Now, at the moment, I just pay as I go. Like I said, because of the different timings of the episodes that I do for this channel and for this podcast, I don't feel the need to go into a subscription at the moment, but they do have a pay as you go, which is just one-off payment. It is literally, as it says on the tin, it's pay as you go. You pay $7.50 per 30 minutes that you want looked at by the AI tool. And then you can also subscribe for $5 per 30 minutes at a minimum of 120 minutes per month. So that would work out as, I can't do any maths at the moment, but like what, $20 per month, which again is, considering what you get from this, is huge. And you're going to see what you get from this tool. I think that the pricing points are completely worth it. As I said, I've only ever paid for the pay-as-you-go section. And what I love about it is that there are no contracts you can cancel at any time. And also your minutes don't expire. So first of all, I want to talk about the content that Summarize will give you. if I go into a podcast episode that I did recently, let's go for episode 31, which was my episode where I was explaining exactly why you need to be on Spotify with your podcast, then this is all of the content that it generated for me. And you can see this is just the first page and it's how much content I get. I've literally got social media content for weeks just from this one episode. So let's go to the top and let's have a look. First of all, it has identified what my podcast episode is about. And then it breaks it down by section and explains what I have been talking about in different sections with different timestamps. And then it also gives me a Q&A for each section that's identified. So for this particular episode, as I said, it was talking about Spotify and how important it is for podcasters to have their podcast on Spotify. It's broken it down into 5 different sections. It's covered the intro. Should you put your podcast on Spotify? The importance of using Spotify, promoting and growing your audience, and also monitoring your analytics. So for each of those 5 sections, I have got a short summary, and then it's also broken it down into Q&A. And then there's also a little note section as well, which again just summarizes what I've said, but in a different format. So there is so much that I can take from that. If I look at just this first section of should you put your podcast on Spotify, I've got 3 sentences explaining what the section's about. I've then got 6 Q&As. So I could easily turn those into an Instagram carousel or 6 different Instagram posts or something, Twitter, whatever. And then I've also got the notes, which again, that can be used as the basis of an Instagram post. But I've got so much content there that I really can pick out exactly what I want, which is amazing. So that is the main content. I'm then going to go down to this section called Twitter threads. I love Twitter. Make sure you're following me at Verity Songbird. I use Twitter probably the most, but this will also work if you are on threads as well. So the Twitter threads that it gives you, you can see the first one I can kind of just count because it's just kind of telling me my intro. But then I've got another, first of all, a really good thread here, which is going through different bits of the first section. I've got a longer thread that goes through a different part of the podcast. I've got another thread. So I've got four different threads there. So again, I can post those quite easily over the course of 4 days on Twitter. And as I said, you can use them for Instagram threads. I know it's not called Instagram threads, but you know what I mean if I say in threads. You can use it on there instead. The next thing that Summarize gives me is content for LinkedIn posts. So here it's given me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has given me content for 5 different LinkedIn posts. Now, I'm probably not going to use all of that purely because this podcast currently, I'm doing 2 episodes a week. So for me, that would be a hell of a lot of content to be putting on LinkedIn. However, I could maybe pick my top 2 and use those instead. Or equally, if you are only putting out 1 podcast episode per week, then you could use all 5, or maybe you just want to pick 4 and post every other day. It depends on how you work your LinkedIn post schedule. That's if you're on LinkedIn at all. What it has got next is assets for YouTube. Now, this section is a lot shorter, but that is because you can use information from other sections, such as the main content for the YouTube content. But what I like here is that it has got the video section headlines for me. It's essentially created the timestamps for me already. And it's also come up with a load of keywords that I can add into my YouTube descriptions if I want to. Summarize also gives me a blog post. And what's really cool about this is that they have recently upgraded the blog post feature so that when you upload your episode for going through the AI software, is it will ask you what kind of blog post do you want? Do you want a kind of standard blog post with sentences and paragraphs? Do you want a checklist, or do you want a how-to guide? And I think that's really cool because you can do something really different with your content. So for a lot of my podcast episodes, they start off live as a blog post, or they get converted into a blog post. So for me, it's not very useful to be generated another blog post because I've already got a blog post on that podcast episode. So for me, what's really useful is to select the how-to or the checklist option, and then I can use that as a basis for a different blog post, similar content, but I can then go after different SEO keywords, or I could use that how to or that checklist and create a new freebie. The next section of Summarize is to give me titles and highlights. So at the top here, it gives me potential titles for the episode. So if I haven't come up with a title for the episode already, then it gives me some potential titles. It gives me an overall summary, and I tend to use this overall summary as a basis for my podcast show notes and also for the description in the description for YouTube. And then it's got highlights as well. Again, I normally use those in my show notes, but not for YouTube because YouTube has the timestamps. But it's got highlights. And again, there are keywords. Next is if we don't have enough content, we are given the basis of a promotional email. Now, we all know how important it is to build up your newsletter. People are on your newsletter. They want to know what your podcast is about. They want to be engaging with your podcast. So Summarize gives you a promotional email that you can use in order to promote your latest podcast episode to your newsletter. And again, I use these as a basis. You'll note that I've said quite a few times throughout this, use this as a basis. What I mean is don't copy and paste. I already said at the beginning of the episode, there is nothing worse than seeing emails and blog posts and stuff on social media where it's so obvious that the person has not written it themselves, that they've just copied and pasted from an AI tool. There's nothing wrong with using AI, but make it sound like you. Make sure that even just down to little things, such as I've noticed that the majority of AI will produce content in American English. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm not from America. I don't write in American English. So for me, one of the things that I do is I immediately go through anything generated by AI and I make sure that it is written in British English because that's how I write. And people who know me, if I suddenly start writing in American English, they're going to be like, what are you doing? That's not you. You haven't created that content. So it's even just little things like that that make the content more personable to you and more relevant to you as well. And just makes it look like you haven't just copied and pasted, basically. So it's got a great basis for a promotional email. And I do use these promotional emails as a basis for my newsletters that go out. It then gives you a transcript. I don't tend to bother with the transcripts just because when I film my videos and my podcast episodes, I record in either Descript or Riverside and I get a transcript with that anyway. However, it could be really useful depending on what you're recording on. If you are recording on like iMovie or GarageBand, basically just anywhere where you are not getting the transcript with it, then this can be really, really useful. You have a little toggle as well where you can either have the transcript just as a whole broken down by sections, and they're the sections used from the main content, or you can toggle to get line by line transcription. And what's really cool is that what's really great about it is that it does put the speaker's name next to whoever is speaking, and it asks you when you upload your file initially who the speakers are so that it can identify. So again, I really like that feature. And whilst I don't use this, it could be really useful for you. And it's got the different timestamps in there as well. And then finally, this is another section which I haven't used, which I don't use, but this is only because I don't feel the need for it. But the final section here is bios. And it will include either a speaker bio. This will include a speaker bio and a company bio. Now, again, this is information that you can input into Summarize when you upload your podcast episode, but it's not something that I use. And that's purely because my episodes are solo. I don't really feel the need to include them. I have a lot of information about myself and my offers and what have you, which I put into my show notes. However, if you've got speakers onto your show, you might find this really useful. You could take the information from your guest release form, for example, and add it in here, and then you can create a speaker and company bio. So all in, I think that you get a hell of a lot of content. And considering this is created in only 10 minutes, like I said, I think you get a hell of a lot of content for your money or for free from Summarize. I do think this is an amazing AI tool. And I would love to know your opinions. Are you using Summarize? Have you used something similar to Summarize, but a bit different? If you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the show notes. And if you are listening to the podcast via audio, then let me know via Instagram or Twitter @VeritySongon. I would love to know if you're going to have a try of this software, if you've tried it and what you thought of it. Because as I said, I just think it is absolutely brilliant. I really, really do. And I'm excited for seeing where Summarize takes itself as well in the future. So with that, thank you so much for being here as ever. If you're watching on YouTube, comment, like, subscribe, all of that goodness. Make sure you hit the little bell so that you are notified as soon as a new video goes up. I'm currently doing 2 videos a week. My Tuesday episodes focus very much on podcasting how-tos, whereas the episodes that come up on Thursdays are my Tech Thursday episodes, where we talk about anything to do with tech in the world of podcasting. So if that is something you're interested in, like I said, please hit subscribe. Those of you who are listening via podcast, again, thank you so much for joining me. I love it that people have been listening to this podcast audio from the very beginning. And so if you have listened from the beginning, if this is your first episode, just thank you and know that I appreciate you so, so much. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on whichever podcast directory you're listening to, and also hit subscribe. Otherwise, happy podcasting. I'll see you next episode.